He rips the dress from his pregnant ex-wife in the middle of his own wedding, and the entire ballroom erupts as she collapses to the floor, clutching her stomach. Phones are recording everything, guests are screaming, and the man who thought he was untouchable is seconds away from watching his perfect life implode, because the moment her ally walks through those doors, the wedding turns into a battlefield of truth, power, and relentless justice. The chandeliers inside the Plaza Hotel in New York City glittered like suspended suns, spilling warm gold across the ballroom as if blessing a perfect celebration. Violins played softly, and crystal glasses clinked gently with every toast. Rows of white orchids lined the aisle. Guests in designer gowns leaned in with admiration as Ethan Vanderbilt, the powerhouse CEO, dressed in an impeccable tuxedo with a smile designed for magazine covers, walked hand in hand with his new bride, Olivia Monroe. Everything was so precise, so painfully beautiful, it felt rehearsed. It felt like the world was witnessing a fairy tale until the doors swung open. A soft hush spread across the room as Amelia appeared. She stood at the entrance, one hand resting gently on her 6-month pregnant belly. Her midnight blue satin dress caught the chandelier light and shimmered like liquid night. The off-the-shoulder neckline framed her collarbones with quiet grace. She didn't look like someone who came to cause trouble. She looked like someone who shouldn't have been here. Someone who, by every unwritten rule, should have stayed far away from her ex-husband's wedding. But someone in the groom's family had sent her an invitation. A cruel mistake, a trap, or something worse. The whispers erupted immediately. Guests turned in their chairs. Camera phones rose reflexively. Olivia's grip tightened on Ethan's arm. Her perfect smile faltered. Amelia took a step forward. Her movements were calm but fragile, as if each breath required effort. She had clearly rehearsed how to walk into this room without falling apart. Her straight, dark hair was parted in the middle, framing a face that looked like an unspoken apology to herself. She came dressed in dignity, not defiance. Ethan looked at her with a twisted smile. Something dark flashed behind his eyes. Then he let go of Olivia's hand and walked toward Amelia with the casual confidence of a man who believes nothing can threaten him in a room full of money and cameras. He stopped just inches from her. The music faded into a thin, uncomfortable silence. "What are you doing here?" he murmured, just loud enough for several rows to hear, trying to stage a scene. "At my wedding, of all places." Amelia steadied her breath. "I received an invitation. I thought you wanted peace." A few guests nodded in sympathy. Her voice was soft, cautious, trying not to tremble. Ethan leaned closer. "Peace. That's funny, coming from you." She didn't respond. Her hand instinctively shielded her stomach. An unconscious gesture every mother makes when danger is near. The sight of it sent a discreet ripple of discomfort through the room. Then Olivia joined them, gliding over like a swan with a predator's smile. Her pure white mermaid gown shimmered under the lights. She tilted her head with feigned innocence. "We weren't expecting you, Amelia, but you look lovely. Very brave of you to wear satin. It wrinkles so easily." Amelia tried to step back. Her heel caught slightly on the polished floor, and she steadied herself with a hand on the nearest chair. A guest whispered, "She's pregnant. Leave her alone." Ethan heard it. His jaw tightened. What happened next started slowly, silently. Nothing seemed dangerous yet. He reached toward Amelia with a long, steady motion, like a man brushing lint off someone's clothes. For a split second, she thought he was adjusting her dress, perhaps even saving her from further humiliation. But his fingers tightened around the fabric along her neckline. Time stopped. The violinists froze. A waiter holding champagne flutes halted mid-stride. Dozens of phones lifted higher. Amelia whispered, "Ethan, stop." He pulled. A violent tearing sound ripped through the ballroom like a blade slicing through silk. The midnight blue fabric gave way instantly. It tore downward across her chest and over her stomach. The soft material bunched, twisted, and gaped open under the force. The motion jerked her body forward, and she gasped as her hand flew protectively to her belly. The entire room erupted in horrified whispers. Someone screamed, "She's pregnant! Stop him!" But Ethan wasn't finished. He grabbed another section of the dress near her hip and pulled again, ripping a jagged, diagonal gash that exposed the slip beneath. The gown that had once cradled her pregnant belly with quiet elegance now hung in tatters. Amelia clutched at the ripped edges, but there was too much damage to hide. Her chest rose and fell in short, panicked breaths. Her knees trembled, her eyes filled with disbelief not just at the pain, but at the sheer cruelty of what he had just done. "You always needed attention," Ethan said, his voice low. But the microphones placed around the ballroom picked up every word. "Now you have it." The guests remained frozen, unsure whether to intervene or watch the disaster unfold like a train wreck. Camera shutters clicked. Someone started a live stream. The red recording dot glowed like a warning light in the gloom. Amelia's breath hitched, the shock and fear tightening her abdomen. For a moment, she hunched over, one hand on her belly, the other holding the shredded satin that threatened to fall away completely. A doctor in the crowd whispered urgently, "Watch her. She could be having contractions." Olivia stepped back, her expression caught between fascination and victory. The bride's perfect white dress gleamed next to Amelia's ruined blue one. The contrast was seared into every witness's memory. One woman looked like a queen, the other looked like prey. Amelia tried to stand straight, but she swayed, her vision flickering. Someone rushed forward to offer a shawl, but Ethan stopped them with a raised hand. "Don't help her," he commanded. "She came here to embarrass us. Let her enjoy the spotlight." The cruelty stunned the crowd. A soft whimper escaped Amelia. She forced herself to stand tall and meet Ethan's eyes. Her voice trembled. "You're hurting the baby," he chuckled under his breath. A small, cold sound. "Your drama never ends." The guests finally broke their silence. Murmurs rose. A woman near the front row shouted, "Call security! This is assault!" Another voice added, "She needs a hospital." Amelia tried to move away, but her dress tangled around her legs. She nearly collapsed, grabbing a table for support. Crystal glasses fell and shattered. The sound rang out like a breaking bone. Someone yelled, "Stop recording and help her." Someone else shot back, "No, keep recording. He needs to answer for this." Amelia felt the room spin. Heat flushed her face. She closed her eyes and for a moment wished the cameras would disappear, but they didn't. The ballroom was now an arena. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on her, like an audience watching a public execution. Ethan stepped closer. His shadow fell over her torn dress. He whispered, "Now get out before you ruin my wedding." She looked up, trembling, and realized something important. The humiliation was the point. He didn't just want her to leave, he wanted to destroy her. A sudden wave of dizziness forced her to clutch her belly. Guests gasped. A glass dropped from someone's hand. The room vibrated with panic, and in that suffocating silence, Amelia's knees finally gave out. She crumpled to the floor of her ex-husband's wedding, clutching the shredded satin to her body. The music had long since ceased. The ballroom was lit with hundreds of flashing lights, capturing her pain for eternity. The cameras didn't blink, and the world was about to see everything. The ballroom, moments before filled with music and carefree joy, now felt like a vacuum. Every sound had been sucked away. Only the echo of Amelia's fall lingered in the air, vibrating through the marble floor. Her midnight blue satin dress, torn and hanging in twisted pieces, pooled around her like a wilted flower, crushed underfoot. The guests who had come to witness a fairy tale now stood frozen inside a nightmare they couldn't process. No one moved at first. It was the kind of silence that cuts the skin. The chandeliers still flickered above her, but even their light seemed to dim, as if ashamed of what they now illuminated. Olivia's bridal bouquet trembled in her hand. Ethan stood over Amelia, his jaw tight, his expression masking panic with arrogance. No one knew who would speak first. No one knew who would dare. A wineglass clinked softly somewhere in the distance, a fragile sound that broke the paralysis. Then the whispers began low at first, then sharp, spreading like wildfire. She could lose the baby. Did he really just rip her dress like that? Someone should get help. Oh my God, look at her. Amelia lifted her head slowly. Her hair had fallen over her shoulders, strands stuck to her cheeks, where tears had streaked her makeup. She could barely breathe. The shock radiated through her body, tightening her chest, tightening her abdomen, tightening everything until she felt like she might split in two. She pressed her palm against her belly in a desperate attempt to steady herself. A middle-aged woman near the front row finally took a step toward her, but before she could get close, Ethan raised a hand, stopping her with a simple gesture of authority. His voice was sharp and dismissive. "Stay back. She's exaggerating, as always." The woman recoiled, stunned by his audacity. Amelia tried to speak, but the words dissolved in her throat. All she managed was a silent plea. "Please, I need to sit down." She tried to push herself up, but her torn satin dress caught under her knee, pulling taut across her legs. The movement sent another wave of pain through her abdomen. She gasped, and several guests flinched as if the sound had physically struck them. The violinists in the corner, still clutching their instruments, exchanged horrified looks. One whispered, "She's not acting. Look at her color." Another voice rose from behind the crowd. "Is her breathing normal?" Someone else answered, "No, she's pale, too pale." Olivia stepped closer, though she kept a safe distance from Amelia, her pristine white gown untouched by the chaos below. She tilted her head with a soft, venomous sweetness. "She's doing this for attention. She always wanted to ruin our day, even before the divorce." The cruelty was so brazen it froze the room a second time. Amelia's lips trembled. She lifted her face just enough to meet Olivia's eyes. There was no anger in her expression, just a profound hurt that made several guests look away. Tears clung to her lashes. "I didn't come here to ruin anything." Ethan cut in with a snort. "Then why show up at my wedding looking like that, acting like this?" A man near the aisle muttered loudly, "She looks like someone who was just assaulted." The word hit Ethan and Olivia like a slap. Their expressions shifted not out of guilt, but out of fear. Fear of the implications, fear of the witnesses, fear of the hundreds of camera phones still held aloft. Ethan forced a cold smile. "This is ridiculous." She fell on her own. 20 people saw him rip her dress. Another 10 had it on video. Everyone knew he was lying, yet no one stepped forward. Not yet. Not as long as the groom still controlled the room with his wealth and influence. Amelia tried again to push herself up, but her strength failed. Her palm slipped on the marble floor, and she slumped forward. A soft whimper escaped her lips, thin and desperate. Her belly tightened again, the pain spreading in waves across her lower abdomen. Someone in the audience whispered frantically, "That could be premature contractions. She needs a doctor." The temperature in the ballroom seemed to rise. Sweat beaded on Ethan's forehead as he noticed the shift in the room. His authority was slipping, the control was slipping, the story was slipping. A waiter, barely out of his teens, stepped forward despite the groom's authority. His voice trembled, but it carried the clarity of simple human instinct. "She needs help. She's pregnant. This isn't right." Ethan turned on him like a wolf. "Stay out of this." But the kid didn't move. His hands were shaking, his eyes darting from Amelia to the torn fabric, then back to her small, pained breaths. Something in him refused to obey. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Amelia's vision blurred. The golden chandeliers above her spread into soft halos. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears, fast and erratic. Her fingers pressed deeper against her stomach. She whispered to herself, a voice so tiny it barely existed. "Please, stay with me, please." The plea wasn't for herself, it was for her baby. Several women near the center rose from their seats. They moved toward her slowly, unsure if Ethan would lash out again. One knelt beside her, ignoring the groom completely. "Honey, look at me. Can you hear me? Is the pain sharp or a tightness?" Amelia nodded weakly. "It's a tightness. It hurts." Someone gasped. Another person whispered, "She's having contractions." Olivia scoffed loudly. "Oh, please, what a performance." The crowd turned on her, faces hardened, murmurs sharpened. In a matter of seconds, the bride became the villain of her own wedding. Ethan moved toward Amelia again. The women surrounding her instinctively shielded her with their bodies. He stopped, stunned by their defiance. His voice cracked with anger. "Move! She doesn't need you." A man from the back seats shouted clearly, "Yes, she does, and she needs an ambulance." Another guest stood up, then another. A subtle shift rippled through the room like a rising tide. The groom's power was fading, grain by grain. Amelia tried one more time to sit upright. Her hand reached for the edge of a nearby chair but missed. The room tilted, her breathing became rapid. For a moment, she felt as if she were floating outside her own body, watching her dignity spill across the marble floor like the shattered glass around her. Someone pressed a cool hand to her shoulder. "You're not alone. Help is on its way." But help hadn't arrived yet. Not the real help. Not the one that would change everything. The silence thickened again. The guests looked toward the entrance, as if drawn by an invisible signal. Something was about to happen, something heavy and irreversible. And in that suspended moment, Amelia felt another sharp tightness in her abdomen. She gripped the torn satin and made a sound that cut through the room more forcefully than the tearing fabric ever did. It was the sound that finally broke the wedding, and it was the sound that announced the coming storm for Ethan Vanderbilt. The ballroom was still trembling from Amelia's cry when Ethan forced himself forward, trying to reclaim the authority that was slipping through his fingers. His polished shoes clicked sharply against the marble floor, each step echoing like a warning. The guests instinctively recoiled from him, forming a warped path that led directly to the woman he once swore to protect. Maybe he didn't notice their retreat. Maybe he didn't care. His face was tight with irritation rather than guilt, the expression of a man more offended by an interruption to his event than by the suffering of the woman he harmed. He stopped just a foot from her. Amelia lay partially supported by two guests, her midnight blue dress hanging in ripped ribbons around her trembling body. Her breathing was ragged, her hand remained pressed tight against her belly. She could no longer hide the pain, and she shouldn't have to. But Ethan only saw an inconvenience. "Enough," he announced loudly, his voice echoing through the ballroom. "She's fine. She's overreacting. She always does this when she wants attention." The crowd reacted instantly. Some gasped, others shook their heads, a few exchanged looks of disbelief. The lie was so brazen that even those who once admired him felt a crack in the illusion. The groom was coming undone. Ethan held up his hands in a gesture meant to look calming, but the tremor in his fingers betrayed him. She fell. That's all. No one touched her. A man from the left side spoke up. "We saw you rip her dress." Ethan snapped his gaze toward him. "You misinterpreted what you saw." Another voice called out, "I recorded it." The silence hit harder than the statement itself. Ethan froze. His eyes shot to the cluster of guests holding phones. Dozens of screens reflected his cold, incriminating face back at him. The panic that flickered behind his eyes was brief, almost invisible, but the room felt it. Still, he doubled down. "You people don't understand. That wasn't an assault. I was helping her adjust her dress. She stumbled. The fabric tore on its own. The absurdity was almost unbelievable. Guests stared with a mixture of disgust and shock. Someone muttered just loud enough for others to hear, "If that's adjusting, then gravity must be tailoring too." Amelia lifted her head. Her vision was blurry, but her hearing was sharp. Every lie cut through her like glass. She gathered what strength she could and whispered, "Why are you doing this? You know what happened." Her voice was soft, but the room went silent to hear it. Ethan leaned down slightly, lowering his tone as if speaking to a child throwing a tantrum. "You're embarrassed. I get it. But don't turn this into something it's not." Amelia's eyes widened, not with fear, but with the realization that he truly believed his power would shield him from consequences. He expected the world to bend to his version of events. It always had. A woman kneeling beside Amelia looked up at him with pure disbelief. "She is pregnant. She is clearly in pain. Show some humanity." The groom straightened, adjusting his tuxedo jacket with a sharp tug. Humanity. An interesting word coming from strangers who don't know the situation. Someone near the back shouted, "We know enough!" The tension snapped again, tighter and sharper than before. Ethan realized he was losing control of the narrative, so he switched tactics. His voice softened, coated in false sympathy. "Amelia, let me help you up. Come on, you need some fresh air." But as he reached for her, several guests moved at once, blocking him. A wall of bodies rose between him and the woman he had hurt. The gesture was instinctual, protective, and devastating to his ego. His expression darkened. "Move. That's my ex-wife. I have every right to speak with her." The waiter from before stepped forward again. His face was pale but determined. "You lost that right when you tore her dress." A sudden murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Ethan's jaw tightened so hard, the muscle trembled along the edge. He glared at the young waiter as if the boy's mere existence offended him. "Watch your mouth." But the kid didn't back down. Neither did the guests around him. The power dynamic of the entire wedding had shifted. The groom was now the outsider. Amelia exhaled a shaky breath. Her abdomen seized again. The pain radiated downward like a warning. One of the women holding her touched her forehead gently. "You're sweating. We need to check your pulse." Amelia nodded weakly. "It's fast. Too fast." Her voice trembled, but it had enough clarity to draw more attention. A doctor pushed through the crowd, kneeling beside her, checking her pulse, assessing her breathing, pressing lightly on her abdomen. His expression tightened. These could be stress-induced contractions. She needs to be monitored immediately. Ethan let out a harsh laugh. "She's not contracting. She's trying to ruin my wedding." She always had a flair for dramatic entrances. The doctor looked up at him sharply. "I am a board-certified obstetrician, and you need to back away right now." The authority in his tone sliced cleanly through the lingering doubt in the room. Several people nodded in agreement. A few guests even clapped softly, relieved that someone finally said what needed to be said, but Ethan didn't back away. He took a half step forward, still clinging to the fantasy that he commanded the room. "You don't tell me what to do at my own wedding." "It stopped being your wedding," a woman near the aisle said, her voice shaking with anger. "The moment you assaulted a pregnant woman." The word rang out again, assault. It took root in the air with an undeniable weight. Ethan felt it. He heard the cameras. He saw the faces around him harden. He snapped back. "I didn't assault her. She provoked me. She shouldn't have been here in the first place." The doctor cut in. "Nothing justifies endangering a pregnancy." Amelia's breath hitched again. A sharp pain gripped her abdomen, and she hunched over instinctively. The doctor steadied her immediately. "That's it. She's not safe here." Someone in the crowd finally screamed what everyone had been thinking. "Call the police!" The ballroom erupted in fresh chaos. Voices rose, phones dialed emergency services, people pushed toward the exits to clear space. The groom's family looked horrified not at Amelia's suffering, but at the public spectacle now attached to their name. Ethan looked around in disbelief. His wedding, his image, his carefully orchestrated life was crumbling right in front of him. And the worst part was, he still thought he could save it. He lifted his chin and declared loudly, "Do what you want. None of you understand the truth." But the truth was already in the room. It was in the videos. It was in the witnesses. It was in the sound of ripping satin that would echo through a ballroom that would never forget. It was in the silence that followed his words, a silence colder and heavier than anything the wedding had heard so far, the silence that comes just before everything finally turns against you. The ballroom felt heavier with every passing second, as if the very air were turning solid. The guests were no longer whispering, they were watching. Every eye followed the shaky rise and fall of Amelia's chest as she tried to regulate her breathing. Her torn midnight blue satin dress clung to her skin in shreds. The elegant woman who had walked through the doors minutes earlier now looked like she had been dragged through a storm she never asked for. Her pain painted the room with a raw honesty no one could ignore. Someone near the back dropped a fork. The tiny metallic clatter was enough to break the silence. The tension that followed was immediate. A dozen phones lifted higher. Guests began checking their screens, their faces shifting from confusion to shock to outrage. A young woman gasped loudly. "It's already online. Someone is streaming everything." In seconds, more screens lit up. A middle-aged man muttered, "This clip already has 20,000 views. How is that possible?" Another voice answered, "Because everyone just watched a groom assault his pregnant ex-wife at his own wedding." The words cut through the room like a blade. Ethan went rigid, his face drained of color. He turned to the crowd and rasped, "Turn that off. This is private. You don't have permission to film." His command accomplished nothing. No one listened. If anything, the cameras tilted higher. A guest spoke calmly but firmly. "You made it public the moment you laid hands on her." Amelia curled inward as another wave of pain gripped her abdomen. The doctor kneeling beside her took her pulse again. His expression darkened. "She's under extreme stress. We need to get her out of here." But before anyone could move her, a notification sound pinged through the ballroom, then another, then a dozen more. The viral spread hit like a shockwave. People stared at their phones as headlines began populating social media in real time. CEO assaults pregnant woman at luxury wedding. Groom rips ex-wife's dress in front of guests. Violence caught on camera during high-profile ceremony. The screens flashed all over the ballroom like lightning. Olivia covered her mouth in disbelief. For the first time since Amelia entered, the bride looked scared not for Amelia, but for herself. Ethan tried again. "You're all overreacting. The video is being misinterpreted." A young man near the aisle held his phone higher and declared with ice-cold clarity, "It shows exactly what happened. There is no misinterpretation." Ethan lunged toward him. "Give me that." Several guests immediately stepped between them. The groom stopped, staring at the barrier of strangers who now stood united against him. His authority crumbled with the realization that he no longer controlled the room, or the narrative, or even the event that bore his name. Amelia tilted her head up. Her eyes were glassy with pain, but she was still fighting for breath. She tried to speak, but her voice came out in fragments. "Please, someone help me sit up. I can't breathe." The doctor tried to adjust her position, lifting her shoulders slightly. Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks, her entire abdomen tensed again. The contractions weren't regular, but they were strong enough to terrify everyone watching. The doctor looked around urgently. "We need the ambulance now!" A waiter answered from the corner. "It's already on its way." The ballroom had become a pressure cooker. Every second felt like it could explode. The guests recoiled from Ethan and Olivia, as if the couple carried a contagion. The lavish decorations now seemed absurd against the backdrop of the suffering unfolding in the center of the room. A woman in a floral dress whispered, "I can't believe he did that to her, and she's carrying his child." Another answered, "No wonder she left him. Imagine what she endured in private." The rumors began to grow, taking the shape of truths that hurt more than any headline. Ethan heard all of it. His breathing grew strained. Rage pulsed under his skin, but it was overshadowed by panic. He kept glancing toward the camera crews now pulling up to the ballroom doors, summoned by the flood of online views. He hissed at Olivia, "Fix your face. We need to stay calm." But Olivia shook her head, her voice trembling. "This can't be happening. My father is going to see this. The press. Everyone." Ethan snapped back. "It's not my fault she showed up looking for drama." The room erupted in outrage at the same time Amelia's body gave out again. Her hand slipped from her belly. Her head lolled forward, her breathing becoming shallow. The doctor's voice rose urgently. "Stay with me. Look at me. Keep your eyes open." Amelia tried, but her eyelids fluttered. The pain surged again, deeper and heavier, as if her own body were begging her to get away from this place. She gasped, "It hurts. It hurts too much." A woman kneeling beside her whispered, "Stay with us. You're not alone. Help is on its way." But help was still minutes away. The minutes felt like hours inside a wedding that was falling apart. A phone buzzed again, then another. Guests recoiled as another headline spread. "Court records reveal protective order, filed weeks before wedding." Amelia heard that. Her eyes fluttered open slightly. Fear, humiliation, and exhaustion flickered together. She had never wanted the world to know she had filed for protection. She had never wanted her private suffering to be exposed like this, but now it was all spilling out. The truth was flowing faster than anyone could stop it. Ethan looked furious. "Those are lies. She fabricated those papers to punish me." The doctor snapped back. "Enough! She is in a medical emergency. You need to get away." Ethan refused. "I'm not leaving her side." A voice rang out from across the ballroom. "You should have thought of that before you tore her dress." Every guest turned toward the entrance, but no one had arrived yet. That moment was still to come. Before it did, the tension reached its breaking point. Amelia tried to push herself up again. Her body was shaking violently. The doctor steadied her, but even he couldn't hide his concern. She whispered, "Please, I want to leave. I can't stay here. He nodded quickly. We'll get you out. Just breathe. In and out. Her hands trembled. The torn satin slipped through her fingers. The humiliation burned her skin more fiercely than the pain. And then her body folded inward. Her head dropped onto the doctor's shoulder. The room erupted in alarmed cries. Someone yelled for ice. Another person called for space. The doctor raised his voice over the chaos. She's losing consciousness. Back away now. The ballroom was finally in motion. Chairs were pushed aside. People rushed to clear a path to the exit. The viral recordings continued to capture every frantic second. Ethan stood in the center of it all, helpless and furious, watching his entire world unravel like the satin he had shredded. And just as Amelia sank deeper into the fog, the doors swung open again. What came next would decide everything. The lies had collapsed, and the truth was walking in. The ballroom doors swung open with a force that cut through the chaos like a blade. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that demanded attention. The guests turned as one. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the paramedics rushing down the aisle paused for half a breath. Something shifted in the air, a change so sharp and immediate that even Ethan felt it. A tall man walked into the ballroom. His suit was a deep navy that seemed to absorb the chandelier light, and his polished shoes clicked with slow, deliberate steps. His presence didn't shout, it radiated. Authority moved with him like a shadow. His gaze swept the room, taking in the scattered chairs, the broken glass, the torn midnight blue satin around Amelia's trembling body, and the panic twisting on every face. It only took a second for the guests to recognize him. Gabriel Hayes, the criminal defense attorney who had dismantled empires in court, the man whose face appeared on national broadcasts whenever a high-profile case broke. The cousin who had quietly disappeared from Amelia's life after the divorce, not because he abandoned her, but because she told him she needed space until she felt safe again. He was here now, and he looked far from calm. His eyes locked on Amelia, semi-conscious on the marble floor, held by the doctor and several guests. Her hair was matted to her shoulders, her breathing was shallow, her midnight blue satin dress hung in ruined strips around her body. Rage flickered in Gabriel's eyes, not loud or wild, but controlled, lethal, and cold. He walked directly to the center of the room. Each step tightened the tension further. Ethan turned to face him, masking fear behind irritation. "What are you doing here?" Ethan demanded. "This is a private event." Gabriel didn't bother to answer the statement. His voice cut through the air with sharp clarity. "Amelia, can you hear me?" She lifted her head slightly, her eyelids fluttering. "Gabriel, please, it hurts." He knelt beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. His tone softened only for her. "I'm here. You're safe now." Then he stood, and the softness vanished. His voice hardened like steel. "Who touched her?" A tremor went through the crowd. Eyes shot toward Ethan. No one spoke, but the silence itself answered. Ethan scoffed. "Don't start with your theatrics." She fell. She exaggerated the whole thing. Gabriel stepped closer, not aggressively, but with a confidence that drew the oxygen from the room. "I saw the video on my way here." Ethan's face drained of color. Gabriel continued, his voice quiet, almost silent, but terrifying in its certainty. "You ripped the dress off a pregnant woman, then you stood over her while she couldn't breathe." Gasps rippled through the room like rolling thunder. Ethan tried to laugh, but the sound broke. People record everything these days. They love to twist things. You know how the internet works. "Yes, I do," Gabriel said. "And in this case, it recorded the truth." He reached into the inner pocket of his suit and produced a folded document. The guests leaned forward, drawn to the moment like moths to a flame. Gabriel held it up. "This is the temporary protective order Amelia filed 3 weeks ago, signed by Judge Molina. It prohibits you from contacting her, approaching her, or subjecting her to emotional or physical distress, effective immediately." Every guest froze. Gabriel stepped closer still. "Right now, in front of hundreds of witnesses and dozens of cameras, you violated every single one of its conditions." Ethan's voice cracked. "She set me up." Gabriel looked at him with an expression that could shatter stone. "She didn't set you up. She survived you." A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. The doctor stood up to stand beside Gabriel. "She needs to go to the hospital now. She's having dangerously irregular contractions." Gabriel nodded once, never breaking eye contact with Ethan. "You will not go near her again." Ethan sputtered. "I can explain all of this. She came here to ruin my wedding. She knew what she was doing." Gabriel answered coldly. "She came because your family lured her here with a fake invitation." The bride, Olivia, flinched visibly. The crowd was now staring at her. Her perfect white gown suddenly looked like a costume worn by someone who had lost control of her script. Gabriel lowered his voice, but his words hit harder than any shout. "This is no longer a wedding. This is a crime scene." The bride let out a shaky breath. "Gabriel, you're making this worse. Please, let's just handle this quietly." "Quietly?" Gabriel repeated, as if savoring the absurdity of the word. "You want quiet after you watched him rip the dress off his pregnant ex-wife?" Her face crumpled, her voice trembling. "I didn't think he would actually do it." Ethan snapped at her. "You wanted this as much as I did. Don't pretend now." The admission hit the room with brutal force. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "She knew." The tension ignited again. Gabriel turned away from them, kneeling by Amelia once more and touching her arm gently. "The ambulance is here." "You're going to be okay," she whispered. "I want to leave. Please, get me out of here." He nodded again. "I won't leave you." The paramedics rushed in with a stretcher. The crowd parted without a word. The cameras recorded every movement. The whole ballroom trembled with the knowledge that nothing could be undone. As they carefully lifted Amelia onto the gurney, she winced in pain. Her fingers clutched at Gabriel's sleeve. He leaned down so she could hear him clearly. "This ends tonight. You will never face him alone again." And with that, Amelia was wheeled out of the ballroom. The doors closed behind her. All that was left was the echo of her suffering and the inevitable fall of the man who caused it. The moment Amelia disappeared through the ballroom doors on the gurney, a heavy silence fell over the wedding. It was no longer the silence of shock. It was the silence of judgment. A silence that coiled around the chandeliers, slithered across the polished floor, and settled on Ethan's shoulders like a noose waiting to be tightened. Every guest was watching him now. Every phone was still recording. Every whisper was a verdict being sharpened into a blade. Gabriel remained standing in the center of the ballroom, his navy suit absorbing the harsh glare of the lights. His presence alone changed the atmosphere. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. His voice carried the weight of the law, of consequence, of a truth no one could escape. His eyes never left Ethan. "You assaulted a pregnant woman," Gabriel said, his tone slow and razor-sharp. "Then you violated a restraining order, and you did it in front of hundreds of witnesses." Ethan flinched as if each word struck his skin. He tried to reclaim his composure, straightening his tuxedo, lifting his chin, and forcing a laugh that broke halfway through. "Everyone is overreacting. You're all being dramatic." "It was a misunderstanding." Someone in the crowd answered immediately. "We saw you. That was no misunderstanding." Another voice followed. She was begging for help. A third. Her dress was shredded. "You tore it." The comments built like a snowball, growing into a chorus of outrage. Ethan turned in circles, looking for support, but he only found faces twisted in disgust. Even the groom's side of the family shifted uncomfortably, avoiding his gaze. His own cousins edged away from him, creating a small circle of emptiness around his feet, as if the ground itself no longer wanted to hold him. Ethan tried again. "You don't know Amelia. She lied to you all. She makes everything seem worse than it is." Gabriel took a step forward. "The video shows exactly what it was. You tore her dress, you put her in medical jeopardy, and now she is on her way to the hospital because of you." The tension surged. Several women near the front row broke into angry mutters. A man in a silver suit raised his voice, pointing at Ethan. "If that were my wife or my sister, I would have left you lying on this floor." A wave of agreement rippled through the room. Ethan's face flushed with humiliation. Gabriel picked up a microphone from a nearby lectern. The sound of feedback hummed briefly through the ballroom. Every guest went silent. Their eyes shot toward him. He spoke calmly, but the amplification turned his voice into a force that filled every corner of the massive room. Let me make this clear. Under federal law, assault against a pregnant woman is an aggravating circumstance that elevates the charge. Combined with the violation of a protective order, this becomes a felony with immediate legal consequences. The bride, Olivia, stumbled back. "Gabriel, please, not in front of everyone." He turned to her, his gaze neither soft nor cruel. It was simply factual. This isn't about embarrassment. This is about accountability. And the world is already watching. A guest shouted, "The world has been watching since the first live stream." Another held up his phone. 2 million views. Another echoed, 3 million. Ethan's eyes widened. He looked like a man realizing he was standing in the middle of a battlefield he could no longer control. "Fine, I'll handle the press. I'll release a statement. Gabriel cut him off. "You won't control this narrative anymore. The facts are already out." Still clinging to his ego, Ethan shot back, "You think you can destroy me with one video?" Gabriel shook his head. "No. You destroyed yourself." A thunderous murmur filled the room. Cameras flashed. Someone clapped. It started as a single clap, hesitant and almost uncertain. Then another joined in, and another. Within seconds, dozens of guests were applauding not in celebration, but in solidarity with Amelia. The sound swept through the ballroom like a tidal wave of judgment. Ethan's face twisted in rage. "Stop clapping! Stop it immediately!" The applause only grew louder. Olivia covered her face, her mascara beginning to run. "This is a disaster," she whispered to a bridesmaid. "My father is going to kill me." The bridesmaid edged away from her, reluctant to be associated with the crumbling spectacle. Gabriel raised the microphone again. "The authorities have been notified. They will be arriving shortly to take statements. I advise everyone here to remain calm and be prepared to submit your videos and testimonies." Ethan stepped forward angrily. "You have no right to take over my wedding." "It stopped being your wedding," Gabriel replied, "the moment you turned it into an assault." The words hit harder than the first. Olivia tried to regain control. "Maybe we can fix this. Maybe if Amelia apologizes for the scene she made and clarifies that she fell." The ballroom erupted in outrage. A woman from the groom's side shouted, "She didn't fall! Your husband ripped her dress off!" A man shot back, "She almost passed out because of him." Olivia trembled. "I didn't think he would actually hurt her," Gabriel stated calmly. "Intent is irrelevant. He did hurt her." Ethan tried one last, weak defense. "I love Olivia. Everything I did was for us." The crowd groaned. Someone shouted, "That's not love. That's control." The room buzzed with a charged energy, the kind that precedes irreversible consequences. The guards at the ballroom entrance stepped forward as police sirens echoed faintly from outside. The sound drew everyone's attention. Gabriel lowered the microphone. "There they are. Time to face the truth." Ethan stood frozen. His confidence melted away. His arrogance crumbled. The fortress he thought he had built with money and image was now collapsing under the weight of his own actions. And as the first officer walked into the ballroom, the entire wedding exhaled collectively, as if a single breath had been held for far too long. Justice had arrived, and there was nowhere left for Ethan to hide. The officers walked into the ballroom with calm, controlled steps, but their presence detonated something within the guests. Every conversation fractured into frantic whispers. Phones lifted higher, screens glowing more intensely. If the wedding had felt like a battlefield before, it now became a courtroom, and the crowd transformed into a jury of several hundred furious witnesses. Ethan took a small step back. For the first time all night, he seemed smaller. His tuxedo, once impeccable and imposing, now looked too tight, trapping him in sweat and fear. The officers approached him but didn't speak yet. They were observing, assessing. Their eyes moved from the shattered glasses to the torn satin on the floor, then to the guests, still wearing their shock like fresh wounds. Gabriel stood tall near the center of the room. His presence anchored the chaos. When the lead officer signaled for him to speak, he moved forward with a calm that held more power than any shout. "There are hundreds of witnesses here, dozens of recordings. A pregnant woman left this ballroom with a medical emergency, and the man responsible is standing right there." Gasps spread. The officers nodded. One took out a small recorder from his belt. Ethan finally cracked. "Responsible? You're twisting this. She came here to cause trouble. She humiliated me in front of my family. She wanted this spectacle." A woman in a green dress shouted, "You tore her dress off." A man added sharply, "You stood over her while she was in pain." A voice from the back echoed, "You told people not to help her." And suddenly, the room was on fire with one accusation after another. She begged you to stop. She could barely breathe. You tried to lie even when she collapsed. You called her dramatic while she was having contractions. Each voice grew louder, more potent, more certain. In the span of a minute, the crowd became an unstoppable wave of truth crashing down on him. Ethan swallowed hard. His hands were shaking. "You're all exaggerating. You act like you know what goes on between us. You don't." Gabriel stepped closer, his expression unreadable but charged with contained fury. "We don't need to know everything. We just need to know what we saw. And what you did wasn't a mistake. It was violence." The officers exchanged a look. One began taking statements. Another collected phones from volunteers who handed them over willingly with trembling fingers. It wasn't revenge, it was relief. The relief of finally being able to expose something that should never have been hidden. Meanwhile, the social media storm outside the ballroom continued to grow like a wildfire. Guests kept refreshing their screens in disbelief. 4 million views, 5 million, it's on the national news. Oh my God, this is everywhere. A reporter who managed to get past security stood near the entrance, his camera already rolling. Ethan saw him and exploded. "Turn that off! I didn't give you permission to film me," the reporter replied calmly. "You lost control of that when you assaulted your ex-wife." Ethan lunged, but an officer stepped between them. "Sir, keep your hands to yourself." The force of the command stopped him cold. Beads of sweat dotted his forehead. His breathing became shallow. He looked around desperately for support, but his own parents were staring at the floor. His friends were looking away. Even Olivia, the bride he thought would stand by him, was trembling near the corner, mascara running down her face as she whispered into her phone, "Dad, it's all falling apart. Everything." Gabriel glanced at her, but said nothing. She was a part of this, and the consequences would find her in due time. The officer finally addressed Ethan directly. "Sir, we need your side of the story." Ethan straightened his posture, clinging to the last threads of dignity. "Fine, I'll explain. She provoked me. She showed up uninvited. She tried to ruin my wedding," the officer asked. "And you responded by ripping her dress?" "That's not what happened," Ethan insisted. "The fabric tore because she pulled away." A guest shouted, "Liar!" Another yelled, "We saw your hands on her!" The officer held up a hand, silencing the room. "We have enough testimony to proceed with this investigation." Someone in the crowd whispered, "He's finished." Someone else answered, "He did it to himself." The weight of those words hit Ethan harder than anything the officers had said. His face contorted with rage and humiliation. His voice broke. "You're all judging me without knowing the whole story," Gabriel replied quietly. "The whole story starts coming out tonight." The officers motioned for Ethan to step aside for further questioning. His panic became visible. His movements were jerky. His voice shook. "This is my wedding. You can't do this here," the officer replied. "Your actions made it a crime scene." The room erupted again. This time, not with chaos, but with the grim certainty that justice had finally begun its work. People moved away from Ethan as if he were radioactive. The lights felt harsher, his tuxedo felt tighter, the cameras felt closer. And in the echoing room, one truth became painfully clear. The groom was no longer the center of this wedding. He was the villain of its downfall, and the world had already chosen a side. The moment the officers separated Ethan from the crowd, a new kind of silence settled over the ballroom. It was no longer the silence of fear, it was the silence of justice tightening its grip. The guests watched with wide eyes as the man who once controlled every room he entered now found himself trapped inside a circle of authority he couldn't intimidate, charm, or buy his way out of. The lead officer began speaking with calm precision. "Sir, we need you to stay where you are. Multiple witnesses have reported an assault. We are collecting evidence from the scene." Ethan's voice cracked. Assault? That's absurd. I told you, she fell. But the second officer stepped forward, holding a phone handed to him by a guest. The video began to play. The ballroom heard it again, the tearing sound, the gasp, the scream, the choked plea, the unmistakable truth. The lead officer's expression hardened. We have visual confirmation. Ethan instinctively reached for the phone, but the officer pulled it back. Do not touch the evidence. His breathing quickened. His eyes darted wildly around the room, searching for someone, anyone, who might defend him. But every face he looked at was cold now, distant, done. Even those who used to admire him refused to meet his gaze. The officer continued, You are being detained for further questioning related to assault and the violation of a protective order. Those words fell like a hammer. Olivia gasped, covering her mouth with a trembling hand. Detained? Here? In front of everyone? A guest muttered. Perfect timing. He did it in front of everyone. Another added, He deserves it. Meanwhile, down the hall, paramedics rushed Amelia through the hotel corridor. The bright, hospital-style lights flickered over her as the gurney glided. Her breathing was shallow, her dress still torn, her hair stuck to her damp cheeks. The sound of the crowd faded behind her, replaced by the steady rhythm of the paramedics' voices. Keep her conscious, check her blood pressure again. She's having stress-induced contractions. We need to stabilize her. Amelia whispered, barely audible. Please, my baby. Just save my baby. A paramedic squeezed her hand gently. We're doing everything we can. Stay with us. Back in the ballroom, Gabriel stood like a wall between Ethan and the guests. His tone was deathly calm. She's on her way to the hospital because of you. Ethan laughed bitterly, his voice tinged with hysteria. Because of me? She came here to put on a show. She wanted attention. Gabriel's eyes narrowed. She wanted closure. What you gave her instead was violence. The officers moved in. Sir, we need to escort you outside. Ethan shook his head violently. No, I am not leaving my own wedding. You are not dragging me out like a criminal. But the crowd answered for him. A woman near the aisle said, Then you shouldn't have acted like one. A man added, Take him away. The officers placed a guiding hand near Ethan's arm. He flinched back, panicked. Don't touch me. The lead officer's tone hardened. Then walk now. Ethan looked around the ballroom one last time. The crystal chandeliers glittered above him, reflecting not celebration, but disgrace. He saw no friendship, no loyalty, no sympathy, only judgment, only truth, only consequences. As he was escorted toward the exit, the guests instinctively parted, leaving a clear path, like the opening of a sea he no longer belonged to. The phones followed him. The cameras recorded every panicked tick on his face. A reporter shouted, You assaulted your ex-wife. Do you have anything to say about her condition? Ethan snapped. Get that camera out of my face. But the officer put a hand on his shoulder and kept him moving. Outside the ballroom, reporters swarmed the corridor. Security struggled to hold them back, but the headlines were already forming like wind-whipped flames. CEO detained after assault at own wedding. Police question groom in shocking viral incident. Protective order violated at public event. The world was writing his story, and none of it was the story Ethan wanted. Meanwhile, the ambulance carrying Amelia sped through the city streets. The siren wailed into the night, bouncing off buildings and cutting through traffic. Amelia gripped the side of the gurney, her breaths short and desperate. The contractions pulsed like strengthening waves. Stay with us, a paramedic repeated. We're almost at the hospital. Her eyes blurred. She saw Gabriel's face in her memory steady and sure. She saw the ballroom spinning. She heard the rip of satin again, the humiliation, the fear, the pain. A tear rolled down her cheek. I didn't want him to hurt the baby. I didn't want this. We know, the paramedic said. You're safe now. But safety was still minutes away. The minutes felt endless when a child's future hung on every breath. Back at the hotel, Ethan was escorted through a side exit where police cars waited. His wedding was behind him. His empire was trembling. His image was burning. A reporter shouted one last question. Do you regret what you did to Amelia? Ethan stood frozen. His throat moved, but no words came out. The officers put a hand on his back and guided him into the car. The door closed, the camera flashes dimmed, and for the first time, Ethan realized that the consequences he thought he could outrun had already caught him. Amelia was on her way to the hospital. He was on his way to questioning. The world had seen the truth, and the night was far from over. The police car carrying Ethan had barely turned the corner when the fallout began. News vans swarmed the hotel entrance like hungry predators, their antennas rising into the sky. Reporters shouted into microphones with breathless urgency, broadcasting updates by the minute. Inside the ballroom, guests refreshed their screens repeatedly, watching the world react in real time. What was a wedding an hour ago had become the nation's most explosive scandal. Within minutes, the first financial alert appeared. A guest gasped, showing her phone to the people around her. His company's stock just dropped 5%. Just like that. Another checked his tablet, his eyes wide. 9%. It's still falling. The rumors started to fly like wildfire. Investors were pulling out. Board members were calling emergency meetings. Corporate lawyers were panic drafting statements. The empire Ethan spent years cultivating was dissolving like sugar in boiling water. Meanwhile, across town, Gabriel walked into the hospital lobby, his jaw tight, his phone buzzing nonstop. He ignored every call except one. The chairman of Ethan's own board of directors. The voice on the other end was furious. "We've just suspended him, effective immediately. This is catastrophic." Gabriel didn't hide his satisfaction. Actions have consequences. "Do you know how many contracts we're about to lose because of this video?" the chairman demanded. "Half our partners want to distance themselves. This is a PR disaster." "It's also a moral one," Gabriel replied before ending the call. In the emergency room, doctors rushed Amelia to a monitoring suite. Machines beeped steadily, tracking her heartbeat and the baby's. Her breathing was still shallow but more consistent than before. A nurse adjusted the blanket over her torn satin dress, careful not to disturb her. Amelia whispered, "Is my baby okay?" The doctor replied calmly, "The baby's heartbeat is strong. Your contractions are stress-induced. You need rest, hydration, and observation. You are safe now. Safe." The word felt unreal, but it comforted her enough to soften her trembling. Tears slipped from her temples, tears not just of fear, but of release, of surviving something she should have never had to endure. Back at the hotel, Olivia's father stormed into the ballroom, his face purple with rage. "Where is my daughter?" His voice boomed through the room. The guests scattered. He found her in a corner, mascara streaked, her perfect white dress crumpled. She tried to speak, but her father cut her off. "Do you understand the humiliation you have brought on our family?" His voice was low, dangerous. "This wedding has become a global disaster." She shook her head, sobbing. "I didn't know he would actually hurt her. I didn't expect it to go this far." Her father snapped. "Ignorance is not an excuse." He pulled out his phone, scrolling rapidly. "Our business partners are canceling deals. Sponsors are pulling out. We are being dragged down in his scandal." A bridesmaid whispered from behind, "Everyone is being dragged into this." Meanwhile, the viral video climbed from millions of views to tens of millions. News commentators dissected every frame. Lawyers debated charges on live television. Hashtags trended. Memes appeared. Threads multiplied. Public opinion grew more vitriolic by the minute. Inside a sleek boardroom miles away, 14 executives stared at a massive projection screen displaying the viral video. The room was tense. Someone cleared their throat. "The shareholders want a vote. If we do nothing, the company could collapse." Another executive said bluntly, "We remove him. Today." The motion passed unanimously. Ethan was officially terminated from his own corporation before he even reached the police station. Even worse news followed. A major investor released a public statement. "We condemn any act of violence. We are withdrawing all funding, effective immediately." The announcement rocked the financial world. Headlines erupted. Commentators declared Ethan's career over. The collapse of his empire was no longer a possibility, it was a certainty. In the hospital, Amelia lay quietly under soft, white lights. The room felt too still for what she had just survived. She closed her eyes as exhaustion washed over her, but her peace was fragile. A nurse approached gently. "There's someone here who wants to see you." Amelia tensed. "Who?" Gabriel walked into the room. His expression softened at the sight of her, but his jaw remained tight, the anger still burning beneath the surface. "How are you feeling?" She tried to smile. "Alive." He exhaled slowly, as if releasing hours of held breath. "Good. Because the world is finally seeing him for what he is. It's all coming down for him." Amelia's eyelashes fluttered. "I didn't want anyone to be destroyed. I just wanted him to stop." Gabriel sat beside her, his voice firm but gentle. "You didn't destroy him. He destroyed himself. And no one can shield him from the truth now." Elsewhere in the city, the police car carrying Ethan pulled into the station. He watched the waiting cameras through the window. Reporters swarmed like vultures. Microphones lunged forward. The officers opened the door. He stepped out. Flashes exploded. Questions flew. "Did you assault your pregnant ex-wife? Do you deny the video evidence? What do you say to your company firing you? Are you aware she's in the hospital under emergency care?" His face twisted. His words stumbled. His empire had collapsed before he even understood the depth of his own cruelty. Back in the hospital room, Amelia placed a hand on her belly as the baby's heartbeat echoed softly through the monitor. The world outside was on fire. But here, in this quiet moment, she whispered a promise. "You're safe now. I'm safe now." The consequences were no longer hers to bear. They belonged to the man who tried to break her. And by morning, every shattered piece of his life would remind him of the truth he tried to silence. The morning after felt unreal. The city buzzed with headlines that echoed from every radio, every news channel, every glowing screen. Amelia's face appeared alongside Ethan's mugshot as reporters recounted his downfall, his disappearance, her miraculous survival, and the empire that had cracked under the weight of truth. She watched for only a few minutes before turning the television off. She didn't need the world to tell her what she already knew. She had lived every second of the nightmare. She had earned every breath of this new dawn. At midday, she sat across from a detective in a quiet office. Gabriel waited outside with Emma, who was coloring in a small notebook. Amelia's hands were steady as she gave her statement. She spoke clearly, recounting the insurance policy, the recordings, the night on the cliffs, and the years of silence that had followed. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She felt the weight of the truth click into place like a final puzzle piece, completing a picture no one could deny. When she finished, the detective leaned back, visibly moved. "You survived something most people never walk away from," he said. "And you came back to finish what he tried to end. You should be proud." Amelia nodded softly. "I didn't come back for pride. I came back for my daughter." Outside the station, the sunlight greeted her like a warm hand on her cheek. The air smelled clean, serene. Gabriel raised a hand in greeting as Emma ran to her, her eyes big and bright. "Mommy! Mommy! The police caught the bad man." Amelia knelt and hugged her daughter close. "Yes," she whispered, "and he can't hurt us anymore." It was the first time she'd said those words aloud. They tasted like freedom. Over the next few weeks, Ethan's world collapsed at a speed that astonished even those who had doubted him. His company cut ties, board members resigned, shareholders held emergency meetings. More victims of his manipulation came forward. Prosecutors piled charges against him until even the most powerful lawyers refused to take his case. His attempts to smear Amelia only worsened his situation. The evidence kept surfacing, his lies unraveled, thread by thread. In court, Ethan looked smaller, thinner, his confidence stripped away. When Amelia took the stand, he refused to meet her eyes. The jury listened in stony silence as she recounted the night he pushed her. When the verdict was read, a chill went through the courtroom. Guilty on all counts. Ethan closed his eyes as the sentence came down on him: years in prison, no chance of parole, no power to manipulate, no empire to rule, no control over the woman he once believed he owned. As he was led away, Amelia felt no triumph, only closure, a door shutting behind her with a finality she had long needed. Olivia received her own sentence, reduced only because she cooperated fully and exposed more of Ethan's schemes. She wept through the hearing. Amelia listened quietly. Forgiveness wasn't possible, but ending the cycle was. When it was finally over, Amelia walked out of the courthouse with Emma's hand in hers and Gabriel walking silently on her other side. Cameras flashed, but she kept her gaze steady, focused on the future that waited beyond the noise. That afternoon, she drove to the coast alone. She needed space. She needed to breathe. She parked near the cliff she had avoided for 6 long years. For a moment, she stayed inside the car, gripping the steering wheel as an old fear rose like a ghost inside her. But she forced the door open. She stepped onto the gravel. The wind pressed against her face, cool but no longer cruel. The ocean below roared, familiar and mighty. The waves crashed against the rocks, the same way they did the night she fell. She walked slowly to the stone barrier. Heart pounding, she placed her hands on the rough surface and looked down at the dark water that had once swallowed her. She remembered the cold, the silence, the moment she thought she would never breathe again. And yet, here she was now alive, warm, steady, unbroken. She closed her eyes and whispered to the memory of the woman she used to be. "You made it. I came back for you." A small jewel glinted in her hand, a silver pendant she had worn years ago, the one she lost the night Ethan tried to kill her. It had washed ashore months later, found by a fisherman and left anonymously on her doorstep. She held it to her heart. Then she gently dropped it into the ocean, not as a symbol of loss, but as a gesture of release. The wind softened, the sky brightened with the first pale glow of sunset. Amelia lifted her face to the light. She wasn't the woman who fell. She was the woman who rose. When she returned home, Emma ran into her arms. Gabriel smiled. Their little home felt safe, full, alive. Amelia exhaled deeply. Peace settled in her chest. The story that began with betrayal, fear, and darkness ended not with revenge, but with rebirth. She had taken her life back, forged a new path, found her place again. And as she tucked her daughter into bed that night, she whispered the truth she had fought so hard to win. We're free.